I won a nickname, the Great Communicator. But I never thought it was my style or the words I used that made a difference. It was the content. I wasn't a great communicator, but I communicated great things, and they didn't spring full bloom from my brow. They came from the heart of a great nation, from our experience, our wisdom, and our belief in the principles that have guided us for 2 centuries. They called it the Reagan Revolution. Well, I'll accept that, but for me it always seemed more like the Great Rediscovery, a rediscovery of our values and our common sense.
Ronald Reagan had many monikers over his lifetime. Dutch, the Gipper, Governor, President. In this video podcast, we take a look at one of the most important names he received, the Great Communicator. Ronald Reagan was publicly communicating great things since he was young. In an interview, Mrs. Reagan once remarked, "He wasn't a complicated man. He was a private man, but not a complicated one. But he was a very sentimental one, and he was a very, very good writer." All of his ideas and thoughts were formulated well before he became governor, or certainly president. This can be seen in one of his first public speeches when Ronald Reagan delivered the commencement address at his alma mater, Eureka College, saying, "We find ourselves involved in another struggle, this time called a Cold War. This war isn't really a new struggle at all. It is the oldest struggle of humankind, as old as man himself. This is a simple struggle between those of us who believe that man has the dignity and sacred right, and the ability to choose and shape his own destiny, and those who do not so believe. This conflict is between those who believe in the sanctity of individual freedom and those who believe in the supremacy of the state." He carried his themes of freedom and democracy across many of his speeches throughout his entire life. As early as 1961, during a speech to the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, he delivered the same lines of freedom that he did many times throughout his presidency, including in 1983 at the annual convention of the Congressional Medal of Honor Society.
"The price of freedom is high, but never more costly than the loss of freedom. And freedom, we must always remember, is never more than one generation away from extinction. Each generation must do whatever is necessary to preserve it and pass it on to the next, or it will be lost forever."
And just moments after narrowly losing the bid for the Republican presidential nomination in 1976, Ronald Reagan gave a dramatic concession speech that retrospectively ranks as one of the most significant of his career.
There are cynics who say that a party platform is something that no one bothers to read and it doesn't very often amount to much. Whether it is different this time than it has ever been before, I believe the Republican Party has a platform that is a banner of bold, unmistakable colors with no pale pastel shades. And this is why, here in this hall tonight, better than we've ever done before, we've got to quit talking to each other and about each other and go out and communicate to the world that we may be fewer in numbers than we've ever been, but we carry the message they're waiting for. We must go forth from here united, determined that what a great general said a few years ago is true. There is no substitute for victory.
In the foreword for the book, Reagan in His Own Hand, Secretary George Shultz commented, "I was always struck by his ability to work an issue in his mind and to find its essence, and by his depth of conviction. Thinking back on all the time we spent together, I remembered his intense interest and fondness for the spoken word, and for caring very deeply about how to convey his thoughts and ideas to people, not only to the American people, but to people living all over the world."
I believe that the answer lies in democracy. There's never been a war between two free countries. If we're for democracy, we're for peace, domestically and internationally. We can have a united hemisphere, living in peace, opportunity, and freedom. What a power for good in the world we can be if we strengthen our neighborliness and the contact and the cooperation between us.
Here at the Reagan Library, surround yourself with the voice and message of President Reagan, as his speeches are interwoven throughout the exhibits. Can't come to the library? Check out our YouTube page, which contains hundreds of his speeches at youtube.com/Reagan Foundation. President Reagan always seemed to have the right words for the right occasion. On the 40th anniversary of D-Day, before the brave souls who toiled courageously, President Reagan gave one of the most memorable speeches of his career.
These are the boys of Puente Hope. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their value and borne by their memory. Let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died.
There is no way we could go through every great speech and continue to show why he earned the Great Communicator name. Instead, we will end this podcast with what he was known for: optimism.
We have every right to dream heroic dreams. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this Inside the Reagan Library video. See you soon.